video, we're going to prepare the breadboard ends. We're going to create the tongue and groove and chop out the mortises and get the breadboard ends secured to the tabletop. Because I don't have a plane capable of cutting a groove, I elected to do it on the table saw and just carefully lined up, cut, rinse and repeat until I had a groove roughly what I wanted, and then you'll see later I go back and clean it up with a chisel. It's certainly not the ideal method for doing it, but it did get the job done. The next step is to measure, mark all the layout for the tongue portion. It will eventually have a part of that cut into tenons. It's just a matter of laying it out and then using an edge guide and saws to create the tongue. Using an edge guide clamped in place, I establish my line. I go back with a chisel and create essentially a knife wall for the saw to ride in, cut down a little bit, and repeat the process. This method worked very well in creating a nice crisp line. I'm actually cutting about a 16th, maybe a 32nd off of my actual final line so that I can go back with the chisel later and create a nice crisp joint line. I use chisels and a scrub plane to get down to the depth that I want. And then you flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. Using a combination of saws, been careful to do my best to stay on the lines. I cut out the sides of the tenons down close to the tongue line, and then we'll come back with a coping saw to remove the majority of the waste, and then it's just a matter of files and chisels and saws to clean up any unremoved portions and make nice clean tenons. Once the tenons are cut, I round over each of the corners and stuff on the edges. This should just help as they go into the mortise to prevent any kind of breaking and chip out, and just kind of refine the shape a little bit to get the best fit possible. Here I'm marking out the edges and the centers for the mortises based off of the tenons. It's important that they be somewhat accurate. The nice thing with this type of joinery, since it's an outdoor table, is that I actually want a gap on either side, a larger gap the farther the tenons get from the center to allow for seasonal movement. It's one of the few times in woodworking where you don't have to be exactly precise. I drilled out the majority of the waste for each of my mortises and then went back with a chisel and cleaned it all up. This took forever. I used my homemade router plane to do a little bit of cleanup and get the tongue to fit the best that I can, and then it will be on to layout. Next up, I mark out the approximate location of where I want my first set of holes to go in the breadboard end, and base this off roughly the center of the tenon. Now it's over to the drill press to drill the first set of holes in the breadboard ends to receive the dowels. I've got a spacer block in the actual mortise to help alleviate any kind of chip out, and I just want to be careful not to go all the way through. Once all the holes were drilled, the breadboard end goes back onto the table. I used a brad point bit to mark the location of that hole, and then moved it about 1/16 of an inch closer to the table. I then used that mark and drilled a set of holes in the tenon. This will allow me to draw bore the breadboard end nice and tight and flush up against the tabletop when the dowels are inserted. Using just a regular round file, I elongate the holes on the outer tenons only to allow for expansion and contraction without splitting the breadboard ends. I then apply glue to the center, tenon, and mortise only, and then I will attach the breadboard end. I will drive dowels through each hole, and as the dowel just about bottoms out, I put a very small amount of glue right around the bottom and finish driving it in. I want to be careful to make sure that the glue doesn't go down into the actual tenon itself and prevent seasonal movement. once the dowels were in place and the glue was cleaned up, I then went back with a flush cut saw and cut every one of them down flush, and then cleaned it up with a hand plane. After everything had a chance to dry and set, I then cut the breadboard ends flush with the rest of the table. I've been trying to keep my videos shorter, and this one ended up being a little bit longer than I intended, but I think it's a good place to stop it for now. As always, please feel free to leave comments and suggestions, and thank you so much for watching.